So we're here to talk about green software development, and then why would we throw the word dirty in your face? Well, it's easy to think that when working in the software industry that we are part of the solution and not part of the problem, at least when it comes to the climate impact. But we are here to share that this is something we all have to rethink, because we would like to claim that all IT systems, applications, and websites can be considered dirty if climate efficiency has not been taken into consideration when building and running them. So today, the climate impact from the software industry or the data center industry, because essentially software has to be hosted and stored somewhere, it accounts for around 1 to 2% of global CO2 emissions, which is equivalent to the aviation industry. But our industry is in a massive growth. And within this decade, it's estimated that the software industry will emit up to 8% of emissions in the world, but also consume up to 13% of the world's electricity. And these 8% of emissions actually means that the software industry will most likely surpass the heavy-duty vehicle or the truck industry in terms of emissions globally. So then you might think, oh, it's the cloud providers to blame. I don't take accountability for that, but it's actually us companies who are digitalizing everything in our business models who are responsible for this growth. But then it's super cool because there are actually some superheroes of this story. Could anyone guess who they are? AI? No, I'm kidding. It's actually people. It's the software developers, because they actually have the mandate to decide how to run and build your different IT systems and applications. And we are here to inspire how you guys can empower your software developers and organizations to start optimizing for the climate when they're building and running IT systems. So when we talk about superheroes, you might think, well, superheroes usually have superpowers. And their superpowers are the 3 R's. It's relocation, right-sizing, and re-architecture. So relocation is based on the fact that energy is not created equal around the world. So try to move your workloads to a region that runs on cleaner electricity. Right-sizing is really only about using what you need to get the job done and then turning off the rest to eliminate waste. And then we have re-architecting, which is all about choosing the most appropriate architecture for your solution and make sure it's as energy efficient as possible. And then you might think, are these R's really superpowers? Well, Tina's going to get into that because there's a huge savings potential in our industry.
So let's see. So to back up a bit, so me and Elsa, we are from a company called Agilists. We are a SaaS startup, which is powered by Scania. So Scania is then also one of our first customers. So we will now show you how we have applied these 3 R's together with our SaaS tools to make some real impact. And this is the first example. It's actually my old team because I was working at Scania before joining Gaia. And this is the build service that we use to build code when we are at office. Green line is CO2 emissions and orange line is energy consumption. And it was actually quite fun because when we started to use this tool, we had no clue. Like, is the emissions is big? Is it small? What can we do about it? We didn't know. But we started to talk to others. As you do, so you communicate, and we saw what are others doing, and quite soon we realized that every year we have this like sustainability day where we talk about what we can do to be more climate friendly, and every year someone says we should turn off our computers when we leave office, but never has anyone said we should turn off the servers we don't use when we leave office. So we started to do that. And this is what you see here. So we started to turn off our build servers at weekends and in evenings, and it actually lowered the CO2 emissions with 73%. It's quite fun because we did this in an afternoon. So we borrowed some code from a neighboring team, implemented it in an afternoon, and it actually had a real impact. And one more thing that is quite cool is that this is one team, but at Scania, almost every team has this kind of build service. So we also saw that if it's this easy to make impact, we should scale this up. And we were quite lucky because at the same time we were already discussing an internal development platform for the same organization. And in that context, we were talking about it should be more, make sure that everything that developers do is more secure. It should make sure that everything that the developers do is more stable, and it should also help the developers to focus on feature development instead of infrastructure. But what we didn't talk about was sustainability. So we added that to the dialogue. So we said that, okay, when we build this platform, we should also make sure that it will automatically get sustainable when people start using it. So that's what we did, and this is where we launched the platform. The big spike was newly launched, not optimized at all. So what happens just a couple of weeks after is that we're moving these resources from Ireland, which is the default region Scania uses, to Stockholm, which is a region with a greener electricity mix. So it lowered the emissions quite a lot, but we didn't stop there because Elsa also told you about the superpower of right sizing. We should only use what we need to get the job done. So we also started to do that. So we used one of the latest features from AVS to make sure that we get the capacity we need when we need it. So that is the second drop. But I think that the coolest part with this example is what happens next. Because what you see is that the energy consumption is going up. But the CO2 is keeping down. And it might seem strange, like, why is that supposed to go up and how could that be good? But the cool thing is that there was one team doing this, but what happens here is that the rest of the 10 teams are starting to onboard. And when we see that we can add more teams without increasing the CO2 emissions as much, that's a kind of guarantee that we succeeded. So that was really cool to see that this scales. And actually, we saved 90% from when we just launched this platform with no sustainability on top to when we optimized it and scaled it to the other teams. Yeah, and I'll leave it. But I also wanted to show you that it doesn't have to stop there. So this is the total company emissions from Scania. And it was actually quite cool because this was not the only team who started to relocate. It started to happen at different parts of Scania because we started to talk about sustainability and we started to measure the consumption. So one cool thing is that you can actually see the thing that we saw in the first example with the drops going down weekends and evenings. We can actually see that at company levels as well. So it's cool to see that that comes through somehow, that we are doing some kind of optimization. And it's also really fun to see when we talk about the regions that the Cloud of Excellence team at Scania is actually considering making Stockholm the default region instead of Ireland. And that is quite cool because if that happens, a lot of teams will just end up being green without thinking about it. And that would be a really good way forward, I think.
And the cool thing, I think, there was that it was like a grassroots movement, right? Because they were like, there's so many teams asking about relocation that they started figuring out, like, why do you want to relocate? And they were saying, well, it's a greener region. And they were like, oh, really? So it's been sort of a grassroots movement as well. And just to clarify, these are the total company emissions in terms of cloud, not all of Scania. So this really shows that the developers can really have an impact on the total emissions coming from the IT systems that are developed in cloud. If we go to the final, we will conclude with the slide dirty. Who wants to have dirty applications, really? We want them to be as optimized and lean and clean as possible, right? But you have to remember, if climate efficiency has not been taken into consideration when building and running them, they can be considered dirty. So what we would like to encourage you guys is to make sure that the development teams have the tools and the data in their hands where they can get a close feedback loop so they can work with continuous improvements, and also make sure to empower them so they have room to prioritize climate efficiency activities in their backlogs. So that is a little homework that we will bring with you guys from today. And thank you so much.